Welcome to the Faceoff. I'm Caroline Meyer from Get Travel Solutions Consulting, and here with me today I have Greeley Cook from 490 Consulting, Lisa Sylvie, VP of Client Services at Options Travel, and Jeff Klee, CEO from Amtrav. And we're all here today to talk about the topic of team travel versus individual. So there's been a rise in demand for this team travel, and it could also be considered project or crew travel, with requirements to automate as much as we possibly can, from bookings to payments, to make it just a seamless experience for employees to travel for business. This movement from the permanent virtual work during the pandemic caused this rise in the team travel category, we're calling it, for small groups of 10 or less, or possibly even more. So it's a really unique kind of avenue that we're stuck in here, or a new requirement or travel type that we're seeing that's evolved. And it's very interesting. So Lisa, when a company's thinking about employees traveling in teams for a project, small meeting, or for the teams, how do they approach this to get the best user experience?
Absolutely. So for us, we really took the time during the pandemic to try and automate as much as we could. So during our implementation process, we constructed a group and meeting intake form, if you will, that is posted on our website. We point our clients to that direction to find us and fill out just a basic form. And the automation that follows it then takes in all the details of the client's meeting and sends it through to our automation. They get an immediate response, because our goal is to always be responsive, take in the details of the meeting. And then somebody from that kind of point of view, do we send it down the channel of getting in touch with the client, finding out what the details are. So we really tried to put automation to the process and get as much information before we reach out to the client.
Right. So automation plus human resources, trying to find a balance there, using a little bit more automation and a little bit more human resources, but okay.
Right.
Right. Jeff, posing the question to you, what's going on your end, and how are you helping your clients solve this to find the best user experience for this new team travel?
Yeah, we've done a lot, and there are two sides of the user experience that we look at. There's the traveler experience, the attendees of the meeting, but there's also the meeting coordinator. And in kind of the old world, it was a nightmare for both. And and by the old world, I mean where someone's trying to coordinate it, they're working through email and Excel spreadsheets, and they're trying to book everyone, and there's a ton of back and forth. So, I mean, we spent a lot of time creating a product to automate that whole process and make it easier on both sides, so that the traveler, because when you talk about user experience, travelers want to book. Just because they're coming to a meeting doesn't mean they want a whole different experience where they have to call someone on the phone and do it by email. They still want the booking experience that they're used to for their personal travel and their corporate travel. So, we created a tool that we use to for our clients to automate all of that. Setting up, indicating where the meeting is, who needs to go and when, who is invited to it, and then an easy link where attendees can book themselves.
Okay, so so you guys have some technology, you've seen technology out there, but there's not a technology solution that does the entire thing. It's still requiring human resources on the other side. So at your organization, you've had to come up with a different ways of looking at this as well, right? Different resources to manage this, and this new automation that you built.
Well, I think the goal is to when you have to, throw labor at the problem, let's do that efficiently. So for instance, the event coordinator at a company, we rather that they spend their time doing the high value activities, like focusing on the agenda and the content of the meeting, and not the logistics of how to get everyone booked. So we've automated much of the process around the the mundane tasks of making those reservations, so that where there's labor involved, it could be for the more creative aspects of planning the event and making it a success.
That makes sense. I think it's true with M&E, meetings and events in general. That completely makes sense. What about these companies now? Like they have virtual employees that were in offices, right? So that this case A, they were, going to an office, and when you went to meet someone, you just flew to the office, took a business trip, and went home. That's your individual travel, right? But now their office isn't there anymore. Or maybe only a few people come once or twice a week, and everyone's working virtually. Or this has happened. Many offices have closed down, or some are just left in part of a organization. So when they're looking at this and they say, we have all these virtual workers, but we need them to get together in some sort of a cadence, right? To meet with, again, this team travel. What are the pain points that they're looking at? I guess I'll go back to Lisa on this one. So first time they look at this, so what are the pain points of like, oh, I didn't know that. Right.
Well, I think a big piece of it for us was defining what is a group in today's environment, right?
Okay.
So where before it seemed pretty standard, it was 10 or more rooms, and we're going to do a room block and fill the names in later. Today's environment, it could be completely different. It could be in team travel, maybe that is it. We're going to meet Monday and we're going to check out Wednesday. But sometimes you might have 5 to 7 rooms that are staying for 2 weeks or plus. And does that still define a group? It's not something that can necessarily be booked through the GDS. So it's not a one size fits all. It's trying to, if it's a group of, 5 people who are meeting, they could probably use their booking tool and say, hey, I booked myself at the Hampton Inn in Detroit. Everybody else, they have a way of sharing their itinerary. If there's an admin involved in it, we have to they're familiar with their way, and we don't want to upset their process. So maybe we just work with them, have a conversation to define what the goals of that meeting are, what are the fundamentals, things like that. So it's not a one size fits all. It sometimes is very easy to book through the GDS, and other times it might need to follow through to a meeting coordinator to work with an admin to get all the details and the goals in place.
I did want to ask you about one example that we had chatted about, which is it had to do with crew travel and something unique they were doing as a solution. So we want to share this with the audience. So I'll let you go ahead and tell the client.
And this was really challenging and very fun for us to think outside the box. We have a client that does a large amount of crew travel. It came from an unmandated program where the project managers were just like, hey, I drove by this Holiday Inn in Tuscaloosa. We're all going to stay there. So in putting this into a mandated program, we were, at first, it seemed pretty relatively, traditional, until it came to a time where there was non-traditional housing requests. One company in a large construction environment started taking shipping containers and turning them into like a business transient hotel, because then when that project was done, they could pick it up and move it somewhere else. So while those shipping containers or campgrounds or Airbnbs might not be accessible through the GDS, it was still very important to the travel manager and duty of care to track where these people are. So look at the hurricane in Florida, right? So if somebody was staying in a shipping container, the travel manager needed to know that. So how do we take that information, maybe passively put it through into the GDS for just duty of care tracking? So it was completely something we had never even heard of to try and book a shipping container. But how smart is that for the general contractor to put that together? So
totally. Yeah,
right?
I agree. Yeah, it's amazing. It's a great idea. So, and very interesting that you managed to still use a GDS for duty of care in scenario. So
exactly.
Good to hear. I love the creativity. Okay. Jeff, do you have any stories to share or pros, cons, or?
I mean, I think even when you don't have everyone sleeping in a shipping container, this meeting stuff, it could still be complicated. And I think one of the complications that we're seeing, as companies start to do this type of travel where they need to, have teams meet up, is that you've got a lot of travelers now who they're not road warriors. They're not used to traveling for business all the time. So they're not in the booking tool. They don't have a profile. They're unregistered. They don't have a corporate card maybe. So all of those complications around, how do you get, unregistered travelers who aren't used to traveling for business to book, and how do you pay for it? Are you going to ask them to all front the money and be reimbursed? That's a complicated process. Or if you don't necessarily want to give them all corporate cards. So that's a lot of that thinking went into when we built the tool for this. It's, how do you kind of provide a form of payment that you don't have to actually give to them, but allow them in one click to use the company designated form of payment for this meeting. Things like travel policy. If you want to enforce travel policy for a group of people who have never had or have ever been part of a travel policy, how do you make sure that they're booking the right things? They might not be familiar with what your company allows or doesn't allow. And then then there's the day of travel servicing. How do you there's always those last minute glitches. Someone misses a flight, someone does this. Who deals with that? How do they know who to call or who to chat with, or how to otherwise get their flight change or whatever's needed? So there's a lot of kind of, it's not glamorous stuff, but it's the blocking and tackling, the little details of getting people who aren't used to traveling to book what they need and then get where they need to go so they can be there for the meeting.
All right, so it sounds like you have definitely a path for people. When you get this demand, at least you have a path to go and you know what to do and some automation in place. That's good. Okay. Yeah, I think there's a lot of difference between team travel and individual travel. I think Greeley has some thoughts on this too.
Sure. Well, my first thought is, I wonder what kind of star rating do you give to accommodations when you're in a container box, right? I'm stuck on that, but let me get off of that.
5 for privacy.
Yeah. So, Lisa, you were mentioning that I guess the lines are getting blurred, because in the past you could say, some of the team travel, and if it's the meetings type, went to the meetings department or whatever the solution that was in place for, 10 or more people to get together. But now there's this blurring between team, project, a manager getting their team together, and like you said, potentially going through the GDS and just booking it through the normal process. So are you seeing like a change in workflow? And then I guess part of that too is the responsibility for managing this and looking at the volumes and the negotiations and duty of care and all these other things that come from this. So what have you seen as far as workflow and how this type of travel is managed within a company? Are you seeing changes with it today?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think Jeff, hit on a good point with virtual payments are a huge thing these days, because we do have a lot of people out there traveling extensively that were never issued a corporate credit card. So we've very much streamlined that process on how the virtual credit card gets issued. I think we all know that there's still issues maybe on the hotel side of finding that form of payment or actually charging to it, but that's definitely added to our workflow. Getting our agents trained on how to deploy cards that somebody may have changed at the last minute. And then there's also another whole issue of, now in this case, it is really related to clients who are traveling on project or crew, but in today's environment, we don't have everyday housekeeping either. So if somebody is booked in a hotel for 2 weeks and they check out early, they leave without checking out prior to their checkout date, really housekeeping doesn't know about it. It could be for days. So there's also another whole part of what we do is going back and trying to work with the hotel to say, no, he left on Tuesday. I understand he didn't check out, or retraining the actual people in the hotel about what they need to do, because all of that affects our workflow and it affects the bottom line of the client's project financially. So that's also something that does take a good amount of time that just can't be automated.
Yeah. Well, and I guess Jeff, let me ask you then, when you're supporting this type of team travel, I guess these various categories, is there a different cost, a commercialization model or cost model that you have with your clients as far as, how you service these? And
Yeah.
does it depend if it's, of course, I don't know if you consider these touchless, we used to talk about touchless versus touch transactions. And these seem like, there's some can be there's some automation to this, but there's also a lot of, hands-on to make this type of stuff happen. So how do you have that conversation, with the company about, okay, here's what we can do, here's how we can support it, and here's how we have to look at the cost structure for that?
Well, first of all, I hate the touch versus untouched thing. Everything should be untouched unless something goes really wrong, and then you should have someone able to help you for no additional cost. And we look at it like from both a workflow standpoint and a cost standpoint. We're trying to get to the point where we don't have this huge differentiation between meeting travel and transient travel, because the lines have become blurred, like we've talked about. So that's our goal, to make everything around the meeting travel, like the travel part of it. Obviously, there's a meeting planning component where you're planning the agenda and you're doing all that. That's its own entity. But the actual travel piece of it, the workflow, it doesn't need to be very different than regular travel. You should be able to use your same tool. You shouldn't need a separate tool just for meetings and event. Then you have to figure out, well, wait, is this the type of travel that goes to meetings tool, or does it go to our regular booking tool? We really believe strongly it should all be one thing. It's all travel, and it's all the more familiar you are with the process of booking and paying and policy, the better. So therefore, consistency is important.
Well,
Yeah,
yeah,
well-
one comment back to you. It says Jeff is right for meetings, but it's not the same as crew. When your travelers don't have a computer or internet access, oh, that's right. They need an agent. It has to be touch. So they don't even have phones and they don't have a computer. So that's crew, different requirements. That's a good example. Thank you, Megan. Okay. It's more of a comment than a question, Megan.
And I guess this goes to complexity, right? We're always trying to,
Yes.
in some cases, it seems like we try to overcomplicate things at the same time that we're trying to remove that complication.
That's right. That's right.
So Jeff, I know what you're saying then with like, it's travel, right? And so we just have to look at what are the, I guess, unique aspects of this travel or this trip, and then handle it appropriately, right? Instead of trying to over complicate. But I guess in Megan's case, right, you do have some different factors when, crew travel. And again, is there a difference between that crew travel as Megan's describing it versus team travel? Now I think like I'm getting hung up on definitions.
I would argue that even for the travelers that don't have internet, so yes, that's that creates a somewhat different workflow. But again, it's no different than a transient traveler who didn't have internet. So I'm not saying that there shouldn't be a human backup. You can, with our tool, you can chat, you can call, and that's part of the package that you get the servicing. And if certain people need to do it offline, you can still do it offline, but it's about, even at the agent level, so the agents are still booking the meeting travel in the same way that they would book regular travel. It's automatically flowing to the manifest of who's going to the meeting, so that when we send a list to the meeting coordinator, we know who's booked what and who hasn't. So whether it comes offline or online, it still is the same process, and the same kind of accounting is applied.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I guess this gets,
every, I'll say this as a pun, but every client wants options, right? So they might, we've even had to take it to the point where if it's a small team travel, like you were referring to, Caroline, and they say, well, we don't know if we should meet in Nashville, should we meet in Detroit, should we meet in Chicago? We've gotten to do, airline analysis, looking at even what the flights are today, because flights are also, a roadblock component in planning a meeting. Can you even get there? And we did have a client in New York that took their entire company to Florida in August last month, 1,200 people, and and the good bulk of them was out of New York. Well, there wasn't even enough seats on a plane if nobody else wanted to go from New York to Florida.
Right.
So we had to reach out and charter an aircraft for them, a 737, to make sure that the people who, it's great that their company wanted to do that, but can I get there?
Right.
So, I mean, that was, really outside the box for us. We might have incentive travel that wants to do that to the Caribbean, but not from New York to Florida. Right.
It makes sense. It makes sense. Well, the flight cancellations are the height of all that. I mean, we're definitely not back up to capacity. So I like the fact that you got outside the box and did some stuff, did that for your client. I thought it was pretty unique. And also joking that the clients didn't want to take the charter. Then when all the flights canceled, they all wanted to go to the charter and it was sold out.
Exactly. See, so I mean, you can plan ahead as much as you want, but I think a lot of it does have to go into where do you want to hold this and can we get there in today's airline environment?
Right. And then overall, like just budget, where you're going, everything from the beginning of the get-go, the planning of it and the size is all different. So really, you're right. I mean, a meeting's a meeting, but the team travel, like that term, I think is new. I'm using it because it really is referring to people who are working virtually or are flying into their organization and meet with their team, their department, other teams. I don't even know. They're doing different things, but they're doing it at a certain cadence to make sure they're still connecting in person because they're all working virtually now. So it was really meant to kind of attack that, but it's similar to project travel and similar to crew traveler. Not the same, but some similar requirements. So it was, so I kind of locked them together, but they're similar. Yeah.
So Caroline, I have a question. Let me put this out to either Jeff or Lisa. So I mentioned before we started the live broadcast here, I'm down in Brazil right now and attending a corporate travel conference. And I was talking to a couple buyers. And the one thing that we were discussing was communication with their travelers and their company managers and whatnot. So with all these different aspects of crew travel and team travel and all this other thing that are going on, Jeff or Lisa, do you have like best practices on what you're seeing, how you're seeing the travel manager communicate the process and the workflow out for this type of travel? Any best practices that you could offer up and what you're seeing with your clients?
I think for us, our secret sauce is kind of just keeping it simple, giving them the options that they're looking for, being responsive to what their needs are, and letting that admin, who's most likely project manager, their job is to not play travel agent. They just want the information and to get on their way. And also for us to just stick to the fundamentals of what is a meeting, that we get involved with providing the air, any type of ground transportation and accommodations. So that's where we just try and excel in that area in best practice.
And payments too, right?
Payments for sure.
Yeah.
Yep.
You forgot VPay.
Yeah.
Okay. Right.
Caroline, did you see Mark put a comment up, or let's see here what Mark said here. You're using a regular OPT. Yeah, go ahead.
If you're using a regular OBT to accommodate travel for meetings, the flows for suppliers, hotels, as an example, are not as joined up as they need to be. For instance, if you've got travelers / guest bookings from a block, that connectivity is challenging. Is not all suppliers nor OBTs have the ability to accommodate it. Yeah, that's from Mark McCloskey. Thanks, Mark. That's so true. When you have the block, then when you have a room block for a hotel, that's what he's referring to. Hotels like when we block a certain number of rooms for a group coming in, is how to manage that. And so like basically saying is we need resources for that.
Well, that's another, I mean, that's a great point, because room block bookings are different than a regular booking, obviously, but
that's
I think the goal is to shield the traveler from that as much as possible. They don't have to worry about, is this a room block or am I just booking like a negotiated rate? And so that was one of our top priorities in building into our tool. So the fact you could load your room block, we'll manage it all on the back end, but the traveler, they're just booking into the room that they're supposed to book, and they get their itinerary that shows the hotel, but they don't know the difference that it's a room block or not. But on the back end, the travel manager can see, okay, how many people, who's booked in the room block. They can, generate a manifest of these are all the people that are booked. This is how many rooms we have left, and they can monitor it to make sure they don't get close to capacity as the bookings are coming in.
Yeah, I thank you for answering that, and thanks, Mark, for bringing the topic up, because that's a really good one, because it is another example of the GDS where we don't have inventory. So meetings, you can't book 100 rooms in a block and stick it in the GDS and sell off of it. And we wish, and have been asking for this industry for at least a decade or so. One travel manager got it in there for one meeting from Marriott. We were really impressed with that, but I never saw it again. I mean, it would be great if group inventory was allowed to be in the GDS so we could sell from it, but I don't think that's going to happen. So we're all building these workarounds to make it the best experience for the employees, certainly to keep them safe at the lowest cost, and also have the, be mostly operationally efficient for suppliers here, right? So it all makes sense. But I think we may have another question. Let me check. And we're almost coming to the top of the hour. So if anyone does any questions, go ahead and shoot them in. Yeah, we did this one. Okay, this is Mark's.
Yep.
Okay,
Yeah, I don't see anything. Yep.
Okay, good. Mark or Lisa, do you have any final thoughts you want to share? Anything that you wanted, like, oh, I forgot to say this. You wanted to share it really quick?
Oh, I forgot. I think as technology is out there, certainly there were plenty of people to visit at GBTA this year that are coming up with really creative ways to partner with that can streamline this on behalf of all of us, that can attach maybe an app to something so that you are able to reach the actual travelers staying in the rooms that maybe say, I checked out, and that can create two-way communication is terrific to see the innovation that's coming and to solve a lot of these one-offs that do involve, human interaction. Yeah. Okay, Jeff?
Yeah, I would just add, I mean, the technology is getting better and better, and all these cumbersome processes that, we've had to go through forever. There is automation now. There are better ways to do it, and that's only going to be more so down the road. So I mean, I would just advise everyone, make sure when you pick your vendors, you're going with vendors who are pushing the envelope, who are addressing this issue very aggressively, because there's a lot to be gained here, and I think that you should pick your vendors carefully in this regard.
Well, I agree. There's a lot of room for improvement as usual in everything in this industry, but I think this is a good, again, complex topic that we broke down and hopefully gave some suggestions to people about best practices and where to find it. If you missed this video, we'll list this on YouTube live on the Faceoff channel. And if you register for the Zoom, you'll get a link to it. We'll post it out on LinkedIn for everybody to see as well. And I just want to say thank you to the entire panel. Thank you, Lisa and Jeff, for speaking today on the topic and helping us all. And Greeley, thanks so much for being my co-host again. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yep. And we'll hear from us all later, and you can reach us all on LinkedIn and you can find us there. So have a great day. And go to the YouTube page, make sure you like it and subscribe to it, because every month we do these. And if you like the video, it generates more, and you subscribe to it, will remind you every time one is coming up. Okay, that's it. I hope you all have a great day. Happy Tuesday.